Okay.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to our webinar today. Today, our presenter is Liz Pateo from Fastpath. Liz has been in the Dynamics space as an end user. She's a consultant, has been a consultant rather, and she's now in a sales capacity, has been for over 15 years. Before that, she was an accountant and an auditor. So Liz has quite a bit of expertise and past experience to share with us. I just want to remind everybody before we get started that if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the question box, and I will call them out to Liz. And without further ado, Liz, we're ready.
Thanks, Abby. I appreciate that. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to find out a little bit more about Fastpath and who we are and what we do. And maybe some of you on the call are actually already familiar with us and just kind of want to see a little bit more, and maybe some of you have never heard of us. So I just do appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys about our company and a little bit about what we do and show you guys the product. I'm not going to go extremely in-depth into the product. I really want to be respectful of the time of the webinar and keep it to an hour and still allow time for questions and answers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a brief company overview, a little bit about who we are and what we do, and then I'll go into the products, and I'm going to keep it a little bit high level, but if there's any questions at all, please feel free to type that into that question box, or we can address it at the end. I will leave a little time at the end for questions and answers. And as always, at any point in time, if you would like to see more, if there's something that you're interested in and really just kind of want a demo tailored to your organization, please let Abby know after the webinar, and we can always set that up. So again, thank you and welcome. I am Liz Pateo. Fastpath is a security, audit, and compliance software company. That's all that we do. So we don't do Dynamics NAV installs or implementations or anything like that. We leave that to our friends at ABC and the partners out there that are doing that kind of stuff, and we really stick to our own software. We were founded in 2004, so we've been in this business a relatively long time in terms of Dynamics. We are headquartered in Des Moines, Iowa. We do have a couple of different offices in the U.S., and we are actually expanding to Europe with the opening of a Geneva, Switzerland office later on this year, so we're excited about that. We are Microsoft Gold Competency, ISV, and ERP, and all that means is that our staff is certified in the different Dynamics solutions. We also have CPAs and CIAs on staff. No, we don't have spies on staff. We actually have certified internal auditors and certified public accountants. They help us make sure that we're following the latest accounting standards, et cetera, as we're developing our tools. We have over 1,000 customers. We have installs in over 30 countries. So we have a pretty decent sized footprint in this space. These are some of our clients, and the reason why we have this slide here is really kind of to illustrate the fact that we don't deal with one particular client type or industry or size or anything like that. We really run the gamut. We have all different types of clients. We have web services, state and local government, manufacturing, distribution, things like that, you know, all different types of clients and all different sizes, very, very small clients, maybe 2 users, all the way up to thousands of users across multiple entities. Security, audit, and compliance should be a concern for everyone, not just those that are, you know, publicly traded and subject to compliance audits every year. You know, we really want to think in terms of protecting a company's assets when we think about security, and how we can do that, and how we can evaluate what types of risks an organization has within it, and that's what our software helps to do. So the products that we're going to see today and we're going to talk about, the first one is called Assure. It's a risk-based security access review and segregation of duties analysis platform. What this tool does is it actually takes an in-depth look at the security that you've granted to your NAV application, your NAV application, and based on that security, it tells you where your potential risks are. So, for example, if somebody had access to create a vendor and they had access to pay that vendor, technically that's a risk. Now, it's not a preventive tool. It won't stop any user from doing what it is that they need to do on a daily basis, but it allows you as an organization to do a couple things. The first is determine whether or not that security is appropriate for that user. So if the security is not appropriate, then obviously you're going to need to make some changes. But if that security is indeed appropriate and that user does, is tasked with that responsibility and they need that security to do their job, then it allows you to document how you're mitigating that risk in your organization. So maybe you have an external process that mitigates that risk. Maybe all the checks are compared against the invoices and signed by the controller before they're mailed out. Maybe there's some sort of vendor review process before they're entered, etc. So anything like that, it gives you the space to document how you're mitigating those risks. And maybe you didn't even know that that was a risk. So maybe it allows you to actually start taking a look at that and figuring out a mitigation process and putting a control in there. So it's very, it's a very useful tool in terms of understanding where the weaknesses are in your organization as far as security around your Dynamics NAV system and how to bolster that security and, secure your organization more. The Audit Trail tool, continuous monitoring solution that tracks all changes to critical data. So we like to say, and this is a very rudimentary way of saying this, but we like to say it's like the NAV change log, but better. It pretty much will track anything that you want to track. It'll tell you who made the change, when they made the change, what the value was before, what the value was after. We even tell you where the application, where the change came from. So which application was a user in that invoked the change. So for example, if somebody goes directly into Dynamics NAV and changes data that you're tracking, we'll tell you that the change came from NAV. If somebody goes into Microsoft SQL Server and writes a query that updates data in a table in NAV, we'll tell you that the change originated from Microsoft SQL Server. And the reason why we say it's like changelog but better is when we get to the reporting part of it, you'll see how easy it is to actually see the data that's been changed. We have several pre-built reports. We have an easy way of getting at the data and being able to see that. And then finally, both Assure and Audit Trail each have their own sets of reports. Audit View is a tool that allows you to take those reports, design, assign, and schedule them so that you can have them automatically be delivered to the right people at the right time. So with the Assure and the Audit Trail reports, anybody can go in, as long as they have security, and run them on demand, print them, export them. We have 8 different file types for export. But if you want them actually scheduled to be automatically delivered so you don't have to, so users don't have to go in there and actually run these reports all the time, you can do that with the Audit View tool. Okay, so with that being said, unless there's any questions that have come in during this time, I'm going to get right into the actual tools and start the demo. So what I'm going to do, I know that Assure was the first product listed, but I'm actually going to start with Audit Trail. Audit Trail has 2 components to it. It has the configuration piece, which is where you determine what it is that you'd like to audit, and that's where you set that up. And then it's the reporting piece that we're going to take a look at next. So with the configuration piece, the way that this works is we're going to connect directly to the Microsoft SQL Server where our NAV databases are located. Okay, so we're going to connect to that database. And we can see every database on that server. The reason that we can see every database is that our tool isn't strictly limited to Microsoft Dynamics NAV. It's actually a Microsoft SQL Server reporting tool. You can actually audit anything at all that exists in Microsoft SQL Server, but we have optimized it somewhat for the different Dynamics products. Okay, so if you have custom databases that you'd like to audit, you don't have to go out and get a separate tool to do that. You can use our tool to do that as well. If you have other applications in your organization that run on Microsoft SQL Server, again, you can use our tool to audit those other applications. You're not limited to strictly auditing NAV. There is a little bit more configuration that would have to happen in terms of, Fastpath knows the NAV tables and the underlying structure, so we could assist you with setting up audits when you want to audit NAV things. If they're different applications or disparate databases that aren't really Dynamics NAV related, you would have to understand a little bit more about that database schema and structure to be able to set up those audits, but the functionality is all there. None of the functionality changes, so you can absolutely do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to an NAV database, and when I connect, if you have multi-tenancy and you have multiple companies, you can actually go ahead and select which company you would like to audit, and you can apply those audits to multiple companies at the same time, and I'm going to show you how you do that. But right now, I'm just going to load the tables for Cronus. And as I'm doing this, what's going to happen is on the left-hand side, you're going to see a listing of every single table available in this database. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see the tables that we've actually selected to be audited. Okay, so these already have selections on them. So you'll see here on the right-hand side, we're auditing the customer table, the human resources setup table, the user setup table, and the vendor table. Okay, those are the three tables that we've decided to audit. And on the left-hand side, you can see that as well. As you scroll down, you'll see that those tables are now blue, which simply means that they have columns selected to be audited. Okay, so when you're doing your auditing, you can pick and choose every single column that you think is relevant within that table. You don't need to audit the table as a whole. So if we look at the customer card here, or I'm sorry, the customer table, we're auditing insert, update, and deletes. Okay, so you can pick and choose which event types you want to audit. We'll talk about the stuff in orange in just a few minutes. Okay, that's a little bit more conditional auditing. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I just want to talk about regular auditing right now, not conditional. We will get to that though. So we're going to select that we want to track anytime a new customer is created, which is the insert event, anytime a customer is deleted, and anytime a customer is changed in any way, which is the update event. Okay. And then, again, we can pick every column that we would like to audit. So we don't have to pick them all. We can pick and choose. And, you know, so there are things in this table like fax number. Fax is kind of a dying technology. Do we really care if the fax number has changed? Well, if you're still sending invoices via fax, you would care, so you would want to audit that, because if that changes, then the customers aren't receiving the invoices, then they're not paying in time, etc. So that could have an effect on your business. However, in our instance, we don't use fax. All of our invoices are emailed, so we're not going to track that field. We don't care if that fax number changes, etc. So you can do that. You can pick and choose exactly which columns within each table you would like to audit. And that goes for every single table, okay? So what is really important, and this is important regardless of the Audit Trail tool that you use, okay? So if you're using Fastpath, if you're using the NAV changelog, if you're using, you know, I'm not sure if there's any other competing products out there, but if you're doing any sort of auditing, the biggest key to a successful Audit Trail implementation is understanding what it is that you would like to audit, and, you know, understanding where your key areas of risk are in your organization. So if it's around the whole purchasing and procurement process, you're probably going to want to audit vendor setup, maybe some purchase order changes, things like that, and you want to make sure that's all set up. If it's around inventory, then you're going to want to maybe audit inventory setup and pricing changes, and transfers and damages and things like that, anything around that process. So it's really kind of understanding your business, understanding where the key risks are, and making sure that you're setting up the audits on the things that are relevant. And even within those tables, selecting the relevant columns. Because what happens is if you select too many columns, specifically columns that are not relevant, when you go and do your daily, weekly, monthly reviews on these Audit Trail reports, which we're going to see in a few minutes, you're going to have a lot of data in those reports that you're simply going to get tired of looking at. If it's not meaningful, then the person who's doing the reviewing has a harder job, because they have to now look at not just the rows that are meaningful, but they have to weed through all this non-meaningful stuff. So we want to make sure that when we're setting up audits, we have a really good idea of what it is that we would like to audit, who's going to be the consumer of that data, and what is important to that consumer. Okay, so the setup of the audits is pretty straightforward. If you're looking to do just straight auditing, where you would like to set up, track adds, changes, and deletes to any table, track the specific columns. Now, you see that there's a couple of items in orange here. This is some conditional auditing that we have. We have the ability to audit tables when for specific user changes. So for example, we have clients that say, I am okay with every user making changes to this specific table, except I want to track only when SA makes a change, okay? I don't care when Liz logs in and changes something. I don't care when, you know, John logs in and changes something, but I need to know anytime that somebody logs in with a generic user like SA and makes a change to the data. So what I would do at that point is, you know, under the users equal to, so anytime the user is equal to, it's going to capture that, we would select that user that we wanted to track. Right now in our demo system, we only have one user set up here, but you would see the list of all of your users and you would be able to select which user specifically you wanted to track. Now, as a note point for that, we do give you this option, but the reason why we show it last and we don't, you know, we don't really spend a ton of time working on this is, talking about this in the demo, is that these conditional audits you want to use with caution. You want to make sure that you're not setting up conditional audits and you're excluding something that might be important to you by setting up these conditional audits, because you do have the ability to filter out the report so that you can quickly see who made what changes, okay? So a lot of times people will use these conditional audits for very specific scenarios for their business, but if there's a case where, let's say with the customers, you know, we might not want to audit just for one user because it could allow things to fall through the cracks. We could absolutely filter our reports to see what that one particular user is doing, but we might want to capture changes from all users. So we give you the option to do the conditional auditing, but we give you that little bit of caution to say, you know, just be sure that when you're setting up the conditional audits, you're really thinking it through so that you're not excluding data, okay? The other conditional audit that we have is application not equal to. And the way that the application not equal to works is it kind of works, you know, just like the user is whatever user you selected, that's the only one that you're tracking. Whatever application you select here, you're not tracking changes from that application. So for example, if there was a table where, let's say the customer table is updated nightly from a process from Scribe, or you know, eConnect, or some other routine that's taking customers out of one database and putting them into Dynamics NAV. And you're okay with those customers because those customers are audited at the actual entry point, at that original database. And the routine that runs isn't adding any additional information that's coming from the database. It's really just simply moving them over. You might want to say, okay, well, we don't care about any time that change comes from, and let's say, you know, it's GP that's pushing customers over to NAV. Right, that's usually not the case, but those are just the applications I have listed here that I'm working with. So we're going to use that. We're going to go with that example. So we don't care about those, right? But we do care about any other change that happens to the database. So we could definitely set up a conditional audit there to say, you know, if something's coming in from Scribe or eConnect, we don't want to see those changes because we're good with them. We're auditing them before, when they're actually being entered, you know, at the manual entry point. We don't care about the automated piece of it, okay? So it would ignore any changes that came in that way. You would still see if somebody went into Dynamics NAV and made a change to a customer that had been imported, you would still capture that because we're not ignoring changes that are happening with NAV. So hopefully that explains a little bit about the conditional auditing that we offer. And again, just, you know, use caution with that because you can always filter out things in the reports, but it just gives you an idea of what we can do with the conditional auditing. Abby, not sure if any questions have come in as far as how we set up audits, but if there are none, then I'm going to move on to the reporting side, but if there are, I'd be glad to take them now.
No questions as of yet, Liz.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and one other thing that I do want to point out. So we see that we have some tabs here. There's selection. The reports you can ignore. These are now found in our GRC Studio. This was just, these are just reports that were available prior to us having the GRC Studio, and we didn't get the, we didn't remove the tab. But we do have the ability to audit schema changes within SQL. So with this tab that says schema selections, we can, for any database that we have here, so if we look at the NAV database, we can audit any kind of table events, stored procedure events, trigger events, user events, or authorization database events. So anytime the database is changed, if a new table is added, if a primary key is changed in a table, if someone adds a new stored proc or a new trigger, we can absolutely audit any of those event changes. Okay? Those reports, however, are found on the Schema Reports tab within this tool. Now, because we don't have any schema changes tracked at all, we don't have any reports available, but this is where you would find the schema change reports. It would be within this Audit Trail tool. Okay, so we do give you that ability. For the regular audits, though, we've taken those reports and we've moved them out of here and we've moved them into what we call our GRC Studio, so that's where I'm heading next. So our GRC Studio is basically just the home for all of our reporting tools. This is where you're going to find your Assure tool. This is where you're going to find all the Audit Trail reports, and this is where you're going to find the Audit View tool. So we kind of gave it a little bit of a Dynamics look feel with the ribbon bar across the top. We have some quick link areas here. You have your modules down here on your lower left-hand side. The Administration tab is where you set up security to this tool. You don't need an NAV license to get into this tool. As you notice, I haven't launched NAV at all. This is all external to the solution. Okay, you can set up anybody you would like as a user here, as long as they're part of your Active Directory. It's all Active Directory based. You can grant access to whatever you would like within the tool. The security is very granular. So you notice we have all these out-of-the-box NAV changes, or NAV Audit Trail reports. You can secure so that when specific users log in, they can only see the reports that you grant them access to. Okay, so you can, and it's very granular, the type of security that we have here. So they don't, when you give users access, you can really kind of restrict what they can and cannot do within this tool. And that's all done under the administration section. So again, we have a few out-of-the-box reports that come with the Audit Trail tool. They begin with NAV. We do have a report generator to continue adding reports to the Audit Trail section as you continue to audit new items. So if you're auditing a table in NAV that we don't have an out-of-the-box report for, under the report generator, you would actually create that report. Now, we offer full training on this tool and unlimited support if you purchase this tool. So you're not just given the tool and given a manual and left off to your own devices. The tool comes with unlimited training, unlimited support, etc. So we do walk you through every piece of this process. Now, the reports are going to all look pretty much exactly alike. I'm going to backdate this report a little bit just so that we can see some information. And when we run this report, we have all of the changes here. The first column that we have is the company. So you notice that we have some changes here from Cronus and some changes from Fastpath. Any one of these columns can be filtered. So if you notice when I hover my mouse over, I have a little key here, and that's my filter, and I can go ahead and set a filter. Okay? And then that filter shows up here in my filter bar. It's telling me that the company is in Fastpath. I can edit this, and if you notice, I have all different kinds of criteria here. I have, I can do ands or ors or conditions. I can build some really powerful filters. And the nice thing is when I build those filters, I don't have to rebuild them every time I come into the solution. I can actually click Save Filter, and my Save Filter dialog box is going to come up, and I can give this a filter a name and a description. So I can say, you know, Fastpath only, and I can say, you know, audit reports showing only Fastpath information, and I can make this filter report specific or application wide. Now, in this instance, I would make it application wide because that column company, you'll notice, is going to show up in more than one report. If I was filtering on something very specific to the customer report, maybe I was filtering on a column specific to the customer table, I would make that a report specific filter. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now, when I clear this filter, instead of having to rebuild it, I can just go to Apply Filter, and I have Fastpath only. Okay, and so now I have only the changes that occurred in Fastpath, so I don't have to do it manually. So here I have the next column is the customer, so it's the table name. So if we were looking at the vendor table, you'll see that the table name is vendor, and we'll look at the vendor report so you can see how similar they are. The key field, which in this instance is the customer number, the field that's being updated, the event type, so whether it's an update, add, or delete, and again, we can see these are some new customers being added. I don't think we have any deletes, but we do have some updates. We do have some adds. The old value, the new value, the date, the time, the user that made the change, and then that last column there is the application. So remember, I was telling you, we can actually track where these changes originated from. If we notice, some of these changes actually happened in Microsoft SQL Server, and then these changes here happened in Microsoft Dynamics NAV. Okay? So we have a wealth of information here allowing us to understand where the data changes are coming from, how they're changing, and it might lead to some questions. Why are we updating customer information via SQL? Was there a problem with the NAV application at the time? Was this a bulk update that was coming through? Was it scheduled? Is there documentation behind it? Did I know that this user actually had access to the data at a SQL level, etc.? So it's very important to be able to see a clear picture of where these changes are coming from. Any one of these reports can be printed. They can be exported. We have 8 different file types. Okay, we can sign these reports electronically, and there is a signature log that is captured, and I'll show you that. So if I click on Sign Report, I can put in some notes. It's going to capture the report name, the date, the time that I'm signing, the user that's signing, and I can just say all. And I will click Sign. And now, if I go to my home page, I have a signature log that is capturing all of these signatures. Let me just sort this by date. And here is the report that I just signed off on. It's telling you the report name, the module, the user that signed, the notes that I put in there, the parameters of the report, because it's very important to understand what it is that we're signing off on, the date and the time that I've signed off on this report. Now that electronic sign-off comes in handy because let's say that your auditors are saying to you, hey, you know what, you guys need to start tracking changes to the customer module. It's not enough for them that you're tracking the changes. They want to make sure that you're reviewing the changes, and they probably want to see that review done on a periodic basis. So in the signature log, if you're going in and reviewing those reports weekly and you're signing off on that, you'll have that log that says, okay, the week of January 12th, it was signed off on. The week of January 19th, it was signed off on. The week of January 27th, it was signed off on, etc. So you can have that because it'll show the date parameters of the report being reviewed. Okay? And then it'll even show when you're doing the review. So if you're not doing the review until a month and a half later, it's going to show that the report parameter was January 19th through the 26th, let's say, but or January 19th through the 25th, but it wasn't reviewed until February 28th. That might raise some questions as to, now the data is a little bit stale. You've already gone through, another month, and it wasn't reviewed. So that's where that sign-off comes in handy to keep people accountable and make sure that those reviews are being done, etc. Okay? Any questions so far?
So far, looks good. You're explaining so well. Nobody has any questions yet, Liz.
Okay, thanks, Abby. So really quickly, I'm going to finish up with Audit Trail so we can get to Assure, but there are a couple of additional features that I want to talk about. The first is if you notice there's a Data tab up here, and that Data tab allows you to actually manage the data. So one of the concerns that people have about Audit Trail is how much, what kind of performance issues might I have? How much data does this create? How big are my databases going to get, etc. The way that our tool works is the data is collected in the initial database where that data change happened. So in this instance, it would be collected in that, that demo NAV database. And then there is a process that runs on a nightly basis, but you can set it up to run, out of the box it runs nightly. You can set it up to run twice a day, hourly, whatever you want. That takes all of the data from all of the different databases that have Audit Trail changes in them and moves it to a Fastpath database, and that's where this GRC Studio reads from. Okay, so the GRC Studio is reading from that Fastpath database. Now, let's say a change happens, and that process to move the data isn't going to run for another 6 hours, or it's not going to run until tonight, and we really need to see something changed in the system, and nobody knows how it changed, and no one understands how that change happened. So we want to be able to run that on demand. We can absolutely do that. Under the Collect AT Data here, it'll show us all of our different databases. And it's just going to say, it's just going to ask us if we want to move the Audit Trail data from the source database to the FP Assured database for reporting. And we're going to say, yep, let's move it. Okay, so it's just going to confirm that we're sure we want to do this. We're going to click yes, and it's been collected. So now, any changes that have been made real time have been moved into our database so that we can run the reports and see them. So we have the ability to do that on demand. And again, you can secure who has access to actually be doing the collection. Okay. The other thing is the managed data. So once all of this data is moved into the FP Assured Dynamics database, okay, it sits there and it grows, and that's what the reports run off of. Well, you have the ability to archive and purge this data right from within the tool. So let's say, for example, you've been using the Audit Trail tool for a good 9 to 10 months, and there's 30, 40, 50,000 rows of data. Maybe there's more. Maybe there's something like 300 or 400,000 rows of data. When you run your reports, it's looking at that complete set of data. It's looking at those 400,000 rows. Well, maybe you only need to keep about 3 months of data live, and then the rest can be archived. You can certainly choose to archive data. Okay, you can say we'll archive anything older than, and let's say we're keeping 3 months. We're going to archive anything older than September 30th or October 1st. Okay, so anything from October 2014 on, we're going to go ahead and archive. That's only 45 rows of data, so we'll go ahead and archive that. But now, let's say the auditors come in next week and they say, hey, run me a full year report from 2014 on, for all of 2014 for all of the changes that happened here, because they want to do some reviews. Well, we're going to have to restore some of that data because I've archived everything older than October 2014. So we can do that. We can most certainly say, okay, we're going to restore anything that happened from October 2014, actually, I'm sorry, September 2014 onward. And then we're going to go ahead and, restore that data back into the system. And we'll go ahead and restore. And that's bringing in anything from January 2014 onward. It was only 2 rows of data. We didn't have a lot of data in 2014 at all. The rest of the stuff is still in archive because that's the older stuff. That's the stuff that's from 2013, etc. We didn't need that, so we just restored those 2 rows. So we can move data back and forth between the live and the archive on demand so that your reports are optimized and they're running faster. And then finally, if your auditors say, well, Audit Trail data is not really like financial data, you only need to keep 3 years worth of Audit Trail data available, you can then purge anything older than that time period. And when you purge it, it is gone forever. Okay, you can only purge something that's been archived. You can't purge from the live. It's only going to purge from the archive. But just to note that if you're doing any kind of purge that is a complete, it will be gone forever. Okay. So, but we do give you the ability to manage that data. And then finally, the last thing that I wanted to show you is I talked a little bit about the Audit View tool, the ability to schedule those reports. So I can come in here and I can run this customer report on demand, but maybe instead of that, I want it just sent weekly to my accounts receivable manager. So I'm going to click Add to Schedule. and I'm going to create a schedule here. I'm going to create a report. We'll give it a name. So I'm just going to call this weekly cost report. Okay, and now I can put some criteria in here: week to date, month to date, quarter to date, year to date, previous week, month, quarter, or year. If I want a daily report, I would do last number of days. I'm going to go ahead and do a previous week to date report, but I'm going to have it delivered every Monday to my AR manager. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. If I wanted to add a filter, I could. So we talked about those filters that we could build. We could absolutely apply filters here. Let's say I wanted to build a report that got delivered daily for any customer that went above 20, whose credit limits were set to above $25,000. I could absolutely do that using filters. Okay. In this instance, though, I want the full set of data. I'm not going to filter anything. We're going to go ahead and click next. And this all looks good. So I'm going to hit save, and now I'm going to determine who should get this report and how they should get it. So I'm going to send this in email to Excel, in an Excel format to Cassidy, and I'm going to save it to a folder in PDF format, and I'm going to save it out to the network somewhere. In this example, I'm just going to put it on the desktop, but I do have the ability to save it wherever I want. This is a weekly report, so I'm going to choose which day of the week I want it sent on, and I do want this delivered every Monday. And I'm going to have this start Monday the 19th, and I'm not going to give it an end date. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click next. Again, I can review all of this, and if it all looks good, I will hit schedule, and now this report is set to be automatically delivered. I can delete this schedule if I need to. I can run this report on demand, so I can just, run it. It's going to run it with the criteria in the report. If I needed to edit the schedule in any way, let's say Cassidy is no longer the recipient, needs to be somebody else, I don't have to delete the whole thing and start from scratch. I can just hit edit schedule and change the recipient. Okay? So that's a little bit about the Audit View tool. And in any report where you see that Add to Schedule button, that means that the report can be scheduled with the Audit View tool. Okay? So here, with the last 10 minutes or so, I'm going to move into the Assure tool. And the Assure tool is our segregation of duties analysis tool. And this Assure tool allows us to see a lot about the security that we set up for Dynamics NAV. So we do have a bunch of reports here. We have some super user lists. We have some user role lists, so we can see what users have which roles in the different in the system, etc. So we can see users, what companies they have access to, etc. So these are all reports available right out of the box. We can, see a little bit about what access specific roles give. So if we look here, we can see the role ID, the type of access that it's giving, the object it's giving access to, and what type of access it's giving. Okay, so we have all of that information available to us. And sometimes the auditors come in, or maybe not even the auditors, maybe somebody from your internal audit, or maybe somebody just from the finance department doing a review and says, hey, I need to know who has access to do a specific thing. So we can pick a company and say, okay, who in Fastpath can actually set up a vendor? So we'll select the object type as table data, and we'll go ahead and find the object called vendor. And we'll click go. And we can see here that the following users, as soon as this is done, and I apologize for the delay. This is normally much quicker than this. Here we go. We can see that these following users have access to the vendor object, okay? And we can see what kind of access they have. By clicking on any one of these users, you'll see as I scroll down and click, we can actually see what roles they've been given. Unfortunately, it looks like everybody is actually a super user in our organization, but it would tell us on the right-hand side the details. So what role they're being granted and what type of access that's giving them, if it's giving them read, insert, modify, delete, execute. Okay, if we were to look at another object, so let's look at customer and click go, we can see who has access to the customer object. And again, we see the same users, they're super users. This user here, I think it's Boucher, has a couple of roles that is giving them access. So you can do this with any object in the system. Excuse me, you can do it for the other company too. So if we wanted to look at Cronus, we could do the same. Now, it is a little tedious to go object to object to object, and then hit print or hit export and go to the next object, hit print or export. We like to make things easy, so you can actually aggregate objects under what we call critical access. So there's a button here called Customize Critical Access, and all critical access is a group of objects. So you'll notice I have a bunch of groups here that we've created, some test groups and things like that. I have a group called Audit, and this audit group contains the following critical access points for my organization. Now, maybe these aren't critical access points for your organization. You would need to change them. But we have bank account, customer, customer bank account, employee, vendor, payment terms, et cetera, et cetera. So just like I would pick the individual objects here, what I'm going to do under critical access is instead of doing that, I'm just going to pick a group. And I'm going to pick the group called Audit. And again, I can select which company I want to look at this for. I'm going to click Go. And it's going to go ahead and run that same query, but it's going to run it on the group. And so I can see who has access to the different objects here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sort by object description just so that they're grouped so that I can see who has access to all these different objects. So I can see who has access to bank account, who has access to customer. And again, the panel here on the right is telling me how they're getting that access. Okay, so I have all of that information available to me. So with that being said, we have all of that available here. Just very quickly, easy ways to see who has access to the different pieces of your system. Okay, but the biggest part of the Assure tool is not just who has access to the individual pieces, but based on their access, where the risks are to your organization. And the way that we look at the risks is we have created a conflict listing. We have gone through an entire NAV install and said, now we've gone through an entire basic NAV install. Now obviously everybody's organization probably configures NAV a little bit differently. We've gone through the basics, okay? And what we've done is we have looked and we've said, okay, based on particular combinations of access, these are the potential risks that you have. And we've done this in accordance with the ISACA rules for SOD conflicts. We've had auditors review this conflict listing for completion. So it's pretty good. I mean, out of the box. It can always be modified and tailored to your organization, and we can assist you with that. But out of the box, it's a pretty comprehensive conflict listing. And the way that it works is it looks at combinations of objects. So if you have access to object 1 and to object 2, then you have a potential conflict. So for example, if you have access to create any of the GL accounts and you have access to any of these objects, sales and receivable setup, inventories, any of the setups, you could potentially maintain fictitious or erroneous GL accounts. Let me just expand this a little bit. It should have come up when I hovered my mouse. You can maintain fictitious or erroneous GL master data and assign it to posting settings. If you have access to GL account and the general journal templates or batches, you could maintain the same thing, erroneous GL master data and assign it to posting settings. And if we go down the row, we can see if you have access to bank account and payment method, you can maintain a bank account and assign it to a payment method, etc. So we've gone through all of these different items. And then the way that it works is you would go under user conflicts, you would select a specific user. Now I do have to tell you that the majority of my users are set to super users, so we're going to see all 83 conflicts for all of these users. We'll try Aaron Rogers. He might not be set to super user. But we'll go ahead and click Go, and we'll see all of the different conflicts for a specific user based on the security that they've been granted. Okay, so with Aaron Rogers, actually he has 0 conflicts based on his security. Let me try to see what he has access to in Fastpath. Oh, shoot, I ran that by all users. He doesn't have access to Fastpath, but we can see here, we'll just do Brett Favre then. All these quarterbacks leave football and then they come and work for Fastpath. So Brett Favre here, he's a super user, so he's going to have 83 conflicts. But if he had a different user access, if he was given a specific role, we would see just the conflicts that Brett Favre would have. Okay, and then what we see here is the conflict, the objects that make up the conflict, the risk level, the conflict description again, and we can even see the details of how they're getting that conflict. But what we can see is the status as well. So if we click on any one of these statuses, this is where we can mitigate the risk. This is where we can document how we're mitigating the risk in our organization. So for example, Brett Favre here has access to vendor and payment terms, and he could potentially maintain a fictitious payment term and assign it to a vendor. So he could, you know, maybe his friend is a vendor for the company and he's going to assign them a very favorable payment term so they get paid immediately, even though the payables process should take 30 days or whatever the case may be. So we'll click on status, and this will open up the mitigation window. And once this mitigation window is open, we have a reiteration of the conflict ID, the actual description, and the forms that make up the conflict or the table objects. Then we have some history, who last changed this and last changed by. This has never been mitigated before, so we don't have any history here. Then we have some mitigation/resolutions. Now, these come out of the box, but you can augment these and change them in any way. So you can have, you know, dual approvals, minimal risk, other, reconciliation in place, review and approval. We'll select other here. There's statuses as well. So you can say that this is just being proposed, but maybe, you know, I have the authority to approve it, or it needs to go for further review, or whatever the case may be. I'm just going to propose this. If Brett Favre had the same access in Cronus, we can go ahead and mitigate it there as well, so we don't have to do it twice. So we're going to go ahead and select Cronus. And we can say payment terms are being audited via Audit Trail and are reviewed weekly. And then we can also say that vendors are being audited by Audit Trail and reviewed weekly to ensure that they aren't assigned improper payment terms. So we can document pretty specifically how we're controlling or mitigating this risk in our organization. Okay, and once we hit save, now that risk has gone from new to proposed. And if I click on it again, just to illustrate here, we'll see that the history has changed. So now it says it's last changed 1/15 by Liz. We can view the history here so we can see this. Now, the other thing, let's go to, if we go to a different user, so we'll go to Cassidy here. And Cassidy, again, is going to have 83 conflicts because he's a super user. Okay, we're going to find that same conflict, the vendor and the payment terms. I've already mitigated that for Brett Favre. Okay, so the mitigation is the same regardless of the user. So what I want to do is I'm going to open that mitigate window again, and I'm going to show you how easy it is, or how easy we make it to be able to use that same mitigation for somebody else for this user. So there's a tab here called Similar Mitigations. If I click on that, I can find that mitigation that I just created. Okay, I'm going to click on Use Mitigation, and what it's going to do is it's just a copy function. It copies all that information in here. So I'm going to go ahead and see if you know, Cassidy does have access in another company, and he does. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Save. But it just makes mitigating these risks a little bit easier, because if we already have it documented, we can just copy that across. Okay. So we do have all of this information. We do have reports as well that give us a conflict status. So this will tell us all of the conflicts that are not in a new status, anything that is other than new. It's going to tell us the conflict, the user, the objects, the status, the mitigation, the notes, who last changed it, when it was last changed. And we also have what we call an SOD scorecard. Okay, so this is going to show us all of our conflicts as they move along through the process. So it's going to show us the companies, the total number of conflicts, how many are in new, how many are in approved, how many are in proposed, etc. So we have, you know, these many users, these are the new, these are the proposed, approved, and further review. So we have all of the different statuses. So what we want to start to see, obviously, as we go through this, is that everything is moving out of this column and into these columns. Okay, so that way we know that we're actually doing these reviews and mitigating. And in our instance, we have a lot of cleanup to do. We have way too many super users. We really should be giving these people more tailored security based on what their actual roles are in the organization. Okay. So with that, that concludes the presentation on the tools. We have about 8 or 9 minutes left that I want to open it up if there are any additional questions or anything that I haven't covered. And again, please, if there's something that you know, maybe you don't have a question right now, you just like to see more in depth, or maybe there's other people in your organization that you think can benefit from seeing these tools, we'll be more than happy to set that up.
Of course, as we said earlier, anybody who has any questions can type them into the question box. Also, we want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded and will be up on the abccomputers.com website later this afternoon, just in case you want someone else to rewatch this presentation or you want to rewatch it and review. But Liz, it looks like at this point there are not any questions.
Okay, no problem. And just again, I just thank you all very much for taking time out of your day to see the presentation. Thank you, Abby and ABC, you know, for sponsoring, you know, this and having us and being able to show the tools. And I look forward to speaking with you guys at other times.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.